Let's take a closer look at these unusual historical photos together. I will be glad if you can help me gain 1,000 subscribers on this channel. This aerial photograph shows Minamotori Island burning after aircraft from the carrier Yorktown bombed the remote Japanese base in September 1943. Located nearly 2,000 kilometers southeast of Tokyo, the tiny island was a vital military outpost surrounded by open Pacific Ocean. In 1907, a British sailor removed iron shackles from an enslaved man rescued near the East African coast. British naval patrols intercepted slave ships there decades after Britain had officially abolished slavery. In August 1942, this dauntless scout bomber from the USS Wasp patrolled near Guadalcanal as American forces invaded the island. The same rugged aircraft type had helped sink 4 Japanese carriers at Midway just 2 months earlier. About a century ago, a lineman balanced on a narrow wooden step while working among exposed wires and ceramic insulators. With no safety harness, insulated gloves, or protective helmet, one mistake could cause a deadly fall or electric shock. Sandy Allen became the world's tallest living woman at 7 feet 7 inches after a pituitary tumor caused extreme growth. She later visited schools and supported people with similar disorders before dying in 2008. In early 1917, Tsar Nicholas II's 4 daughters caught measles and began losing their hair. Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia shaved their heads, creating this haunting photograph months before the Russian Revolution destroyed their royal world. Near Cambrai in 1917, British soldiers secretly laid wooden duckboards across no man's land under cover of darkness. These narrow paths kept troops from sinking into deep mud and helped guide night attacks through shell holes and barbed wire. Years before becoming Denmark's prime minister, 25-year-old Lars Løkke Rasmussen posed with an AK-47 beside Afghan Mujahideen in 1988. He had led a Danish delegation carrying 600,000 kroner for schools during the Soviet War. On September 16, 1922, this photograph captured a Ku Klux Klan initiation near Georgia Avenue and Rittenhouse Street in Washington. Hooded members gathered around a burning cross as new recruits were formally admitted into the white supremacist organization. 2 German Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighters sit half-submerged after ditching at sea. Airmen balance on one sinking fuselage, with another wreck just meters behind them. On March 23, 1926, Buster Keaton and Roscoe Arbuckle escaped Yosemite by train after officials blocked the closed roads. The Highway Commission failed to stop them, and the road camp sergeant who let them enter was fired. On March 24, 1945, more than 16,000 British, American, and Canadian paratroopers landed east of the Rhine during Operation Varsity. The massive one-day assault captured vital bridges and helped Allied ground forces push deep into Nazi Germany. Brothers William McKinley and Daniel Lucas Cruz lived as lifelong hermits beside Georgia's Okefenokee Swamp. William claimed he feared only 4 things: God, the devil, women, and electricity. Daniel died in 1987, and William survived until 2000. In April 1948, Japanese warships were packed into a shipyard to be cut apart after the country's defeat. The destroyer Fuyuzuki had survived the final mission of the battleship Yamato, but 3 years later, it was sold for scrap. Kathleen Drew Baker discovered the hidden life stage of nori, helping Japanese farmers turn failing crops into a major industry. She never visited Japan, yet a festival honors her there every April 14th. This heavily tattooed couple posed in the early 1930s, when full-body tattoos were still rare and shocking. People like them often earned money as living attractions in circuses and traveling sideshows. A soldier guards grain seized from Ukrainian peasants near Kharkiv in 1933. During the Holodomor, Soviet brigades confiscated food from starving villages, and even hidden grain could bring prison or execution. On January 10, 1949, Communist troops captured Lieutenant General Du Yuming after his army collapsed during the decisive Huaihai campaign. Just one day earlier, his force of 26 divisions had been destroyed, sealing a catastrophic defeat for the nationalists. A convoy of new Zhiguli cars crosses a bridge in Leningrad during the 1970s. Built by Avtovaz, these cars became symbols of status and often required years on a waiting list. Two women undergo magnetic therapy in the early 1900s when electric coils were promoted as treatments for pain and nervous disorders. These strange machines became popular despite having little scientific proof that they actually worked. In 1943, photographer Semyon Alperin captured a mother and her children returning to their village after its liberation from Nazi occupation. Their home was reduced to rubble, one of thousands of Soviet settlements destroyed by German forces during the war. During the 1964 flood in Aini, Tajik cameraman Mansurov balanced on a narrow beam above the rushing water. He risked a deadly fall to record the disaster for Soviet television. In January 1967, Mao ordered China's army to defend the Cultural Revolution as Red Guards publicly humiliated, tortured, and killed alleged enemies. These student groups could stop strangers and demand quotations from Mao's Little Red Book, then punish anyone who failed. Italian cyclist Gastone Nencini drinks wine while riding in the 1958 Tour de France. Riders then often carried alcohol because they believed it could numb pain and provide quick energy. At the Tbilisi Institute of Oncology in 1967, a restrained rabbit was exposed to cigarette smoke during cancer research. Experiments like this tested how tobacco smoke damaged living tissue before its deadly effects were fully understood. Australian soldiers buried German ace Manfred von Richthofen with full military honors after he was killed behind Allied lines in April 1918. The Red Baron had 80 confirmed victories, but who fired the fatal shot remains disputed. A schoolboy walks through Reims, France, wearing a gas mask in 1916. The city stood near the Western Front, where poison gas attacks and heavy German shelling made even the journey to school dangerous. This was a sample American food package sent to starving Soviet Russia during the famine of 1921. At its peak, the American Relief Administration fed nearly 11 million people a day, while Soviet citizens received more than 1 million food packages by 1923. Avachinsky volcano erupts over Kamchatka in 1945, sending a huge column of ash above the snow-covered landscape. The powerful blast coated nearby ground with ash and reminded residents that one of Russia's most active volcanoes stood just kilometers from their homes. Camels crossed Kuwait's burning oil fields in 1991 after retreating Iraqi forces set hundreds of wells on fire. The flames burned for months, filling the sky with toxic smoke and turning daylight almost black. In 1954, the Soviet Union detonated a 40-kiloton atomic bomb during Operation Snowball near Totskoye in the Orenburg region. About 45,000 soldiers then trained on the radioactive battlefield, while the true health consequences remained secret for decades. In 1935, this child was moved from Taos Junction to the Bosque Farms Resettlement Project in New Mexico. The government project promised struggling farm families a fresh start, but this stark photograph reveals the poverty and uncertainty they still faced. In Paris in 1917, Marguerite Lavenu married Georges Roy, a soldier from her Normandy village who had been gravely wounded at the front. With little state support available, she chose to become his lifelong caregiver, and newspapers celebrated their wedding as an extraordinary act of devotion. This Harvard bill shows that one semester in 1869 cost just $170.42, about $4,360 today. In 2025, tuition alone costs more than $57,000, while the full semester can reach nearly $83,000. In 1885, the mysterious Leatherman walked a 365-mile route through New York and Connecticut every 34 days. wearing clothes handmade from leather scraps. He spoke little, never revealed his name, and died in 1889 without anyone discovering where he came from. This is Hamida Jandoubi, the last person executed by guillotine in France. He was beheaded in Marseille in 1977 for torturing and murdering 21-year-old Elizabeth Bousquet. During the Great Depression, many American families lived in shacks built from discarded wood, cloth, and metal. Children often wore patched hand-me-downs and went barefoot because unemployed parents had to spend every available cent on food. In this old Portuguese baptism tradition, relatives showered the newly baptized child with coins after the church ceremony. Children rushed to grab the money, turning the quiet street into a chaotic scramble. After the Irish Republican Army bombed Belfast's Donegal Street in 1972, a British paratrooper was photographed holding an injured woman among the wreckage. The blast killed 7 people and injured 148 after a misleading warning sent crowds toward the bomb. A soldier of the 8th Pennsylvania Reserve Regiment holds its battle-torn flag during the American Civil War. The regiment suffered heavy losses at the Second Battle of Bull Run, where Confederate troops nearly surrounded it. Félicette was a French stray who became the first cat in space aboard a Veronique rocket in 1963. She returned alive after a 15-minute flight and remains the only cat known to have survived a space mission. During a military parade in Cairo on October 6, 1981, Islamist soldiers opened fire on Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. The assassins killed him for making peace with Israel, turning a national celebration into one of history's most shocking political murders. Brigitte Bardot became an international sensation after And God Created Woman in 1956. Her tousled blonde hair, ballet flats, and off-the-shoulder Bardot neckline helped redefine feminine style around the world. A century ago, horse-drawn snow rollers packed fresh snow into smooth roads across rural America. Instead of clearing winter roads, communities deliberately compressed the snow so sleighs could travel faster without sinking. In 1958, a landslide in Alaska's Lituya Bay caused the highest tsunami run-up ever recorded, reaching 1,720 feet. It stripped entire mountainsides of trees, sank 1 boat, and killed 2 people. In 1972, a woman ate by candlelight during power cuts, while Iron Bridge Power Station stood directly outside her window. The blackouts were triggered by Britain's first national miners' strike since 1926. In 1986, Soviet coach Alexander Gomelsky walked beside his 7'3" basketball star Vladimir Tkachenko. Their striking height difference became iconic, while Tkachenko helped Gomelsky's Soviet team win the World Championship that same year. Fidel Castro speaks with Yuri Gagarin in Havana in 1961, just months after Gagarin became the first human in space. Cuba welcomed him as a hero, and Castro later awarded him the Order of Playa Girón. During the October coup of 1993, an armed soldier kissed his girlfriend beside a tank on a Moscow bridge. Photographer David Turnley captured the intimate moment as government forces fought to crush an uprising in the Russian capital. In 1968, Jacqueline Kennedy married 62-year-old shipping billionaire Aristotle Onassis on his private Greek island of Scorpios. The wedding came just 4 months after her brother-in-law Robert Kennedy was assassinated. In 1978, serial killer Rodney Alcala won the dating game after already murdering several women. Contestant Cheryl Bradshaw refused the date because she found him creepy, a decision that may have saved her life. Jeannie spent most of her childhood strapped to a chair in a locked room and was punished for making any sound. Rescued at 13 in 1970, she learned words but never fully mastered grammar, giving scientists rare evidence that language has a critical learning window. This family portrait was taken shortly before Christmas Day in 1929, when Charlie Lawson murdered his wife, 6 children, and himself. His oldest son survived because Charlie had sent him away, while the motive remains unknown, and theories about a head injury and incest were never proven. In 1950, more than 60,000 airshow spectators watched a massive B-29 fly dangerously close to a small biplane. The bomber entered the smoke trail too early, narrowly missing the aircraft and a devastating mid-air collision. On February 17, 1974, Army Private Robert Preston stole a helicopter from Fort Meade and flew toward the White House. Secret Service agents opened fire, wounded him, and forced him to land on the South Lawn. In the early 1920s, rebellious young women rolled their stockings below the knee, exposing skin while dancing. They painted their knees with butterflies, flowers, and faces, turning a scandalous fashion trend into wearable art. In 1922, government forces shelled Dublin's Four Courts, where anti-treaty fighters had stored ammunition. The blast destroyed Ireland's public record office and centuries of priceless historical records. A Red Army soldier examines a captured German panzer nest nicknamed the Crab in 1945. This armored machine gun bunker was transported on wheels, then buried in the ground until only its thick steel dome remained exposed. In 1991, elderly people searched garbage containers for food as shortages, inflation, and economic collapse destroyed their savings. The shocking scene exposed the human cost of the Soviet Union's final crisis, which ended with the country's collapse that December. Swedish inventor Per Bergman created this door-sided bathtub in 1953 to help elderly and disabled people enter safely. The design never became a reality because the door failed to seal and the tub leaked. On June 8, 1966, heavy rain flooded Rachmanovsky Lane in central Moscow, trapping this car in deep water. While the driver struggled with the vehicle, his passengers leaned through the open doors and laughed for the camera. A sailor aboard HMS Queen Elizabeth holds a piece of armor torn from the ship's first funnel by a Turkish shell fragment. The damage occurred during the attack on the Dardanelles forts on March 18, 1915. This tornado tore through Alberta, Canada in July 1927, when storm warnings were almost non-existent. The rare photograph captured a massive funnel approaching telegraph poles and buildings, revealing how exposed communities were before modern radar. In 1912, suffragette Sylvia Pankhurst climbed a ladder to paint "Votes for Women" on the Women's Social and Political Union building near Bow Road Station in East London. Her message turned the building itself into a giant demand for equal voting rights. On December 28, 1984, a Soviet P-5 cruise missile accidentally crossed into Finland and crashed on frozen Lake Inari. Its wreckage was later displayed beside Santa Claus, turning a dangerous Cold War incident into one of Finland's strangest photographs. Lavry Valley, known as Charmian, stunned audiences with powerful trapeze stunts and a muscular physique that defied the era's ideals. In 1901, Thomas Edison filmed her daring act. Before electric refrigerators, ice cutters harvested natural ice from frozen lakes and rivers in heavy blocks. Stored under sawdust in insulated ice houses, the blocks could keep food and cellars cool for months. For Planet of the Apes in 1968, actors endured up to 4 hours of makeup as artists glued foam prosthetics onto their faces piece by piece. John Chambers led the groundbreaking work, which earned him an honorary Academy Award. This 11-year-old boy was arrested after stealing a car in Santa Monica during the 1940s. His mugshot captured a child facing the camera with police number 1540 pinned to his chest. In 1960, female students at a teacher's school in Baghdad wore everything from Western dresses to traditional black abayas. The striking contrast captures how different lifestyles existed side by side in Iraq's capital. Reuben "Hurricane" Carter was a top boxer whose career ended when he was wrongly convicted of a triple murder. He spent nearly 20 years in prison before the verdict was overturned, inspired the film The Hurricane, and died at 76. Abraham Lincoln sits between outgoing Vice President Hannibal Hamlin and incoming Vice President Andrew Johnson at his second inauguration in 1865. Just 41 days after taking the oath, Lincoln was assassinated and Johnson became president. On November 11, 1918, Allied commanders posed beside the railway carriage where Germany signed the armistice ending the fighting of the First World War. 22 years later, Adolf Hitler forced France to surrender inside the same carriage. In 1912, plague researchers in the Philippines wore these bizarre protective suits to avoid deadly infection. Their sealed masks, thick clothing, and goggles reveal the terrifying risks faced by workers studying one of history's most feared diseases. Danish explorer Peter Freuchen stands with his Inuit wife, Navarana Mekupaluk, in 1911. After she died in the Spanish flu epidemic, the local Christian church refused her burial, so Freuchen buried her himself. This 1870 photograph shows a Moorish woman from Biskra, an Algerian oasis at the edge of the Sahara. Her elaborate headdress, embroidered robes, and heavy jewelry display the rich traditional dress once worn by women of the region. The Great Pyramids may look isolated in endless desert, but the city of Giza begins less than a kilometer away. Some streets and buildings sit so close that residents can see the ancient monuments from their rooftops. This 18th century European men's shoe proves that towering heels were once a symbol of male wealth and status. Its curved heel, pointed toe, and ornate buckle made the wearer look taller while showing he belonged to the fashionable elite. This early 20th century portrait shows a young man with ectrodactyly, a rare condition that changes the development of the hands and feet before birth. Despite his unusual limbs, he poses with striking confidence in formal evening clothes. In 1923, Germans carried baskets of banknotes because hyperinflation had made ordinary cash nearly worthless. Prices could rise within hours, so workers rushed to spend their wages before the money lost even more value. This school photo really shows a young Adolf Hitler, but the boy labeled Ludwig Wittgenstein is almost certainly misidentified. The picture dates to 1900 or 1901, while Wittgenstein entered the Linz School in 1903. A Paris exhibition in 1955 displayed fake Mona Lisa paintings to reveal how often Leonardo's masterpiece had been copied. The wildly different faces showed why experts must study every detail before declaring a painting authentic. Adolf Hitler poses with a German Shepherd in 1933, years before his famous dog Blondie was born. He carefully used images with dogs to appear gentle and trustworthy, while the Nazi dictatorship was taking control of Germany. Two women from the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service smiled during firefighting training in 1944. Known as Wrens, these volunteers learned to fight dangerous ship and base fires, freeing more men for combat at sea. Robert Scott and his team reached the South Pole on January 17, 1912, only to find that Roald Amundsen had beaten them by 34 days. All five died on the return journey, and Lawrence Oates walked alone into a blizzard to give the others a better chance. Australian troops land at Balikpapan in July 1945 during the largest amphibious assault ever carried out by Australian forces. Their target was one of Borneo's vital oil centers, and the battle continued until Japan surrendered. Austro-Hungarian soldiers haul men and supplies up a near-vertical rock face during the First World War. In the Alpine front, troops fought at extreme heights, where falls, avalanches, and freezing cold could be deadlier than enemy fire. This P-38L carried an ANAPS-13 radar beneath its right tail to warn the pilot when an enemy aircraft approached from behind. Originally designed to detect attacking fighters, the same radar was later adapted to trigger the atomic bomb's airburst fuse. Allied chemical employees line a seemingly endless corridor in New Jersey in 1966. Photographer Elliot Erwitt turned an ordinary workplace into a haunting portrait of corporate conformity, with every white coat making the scene feel more controlled. On May 3, 1945, a soldier from Patton's Third Army slept in Hermann Göring's own bed after capturing his lodge. Above him hung a Rubens painting that the Nazi leader had stolen. During Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Germany used about 600,000 horses to carry supplies across the Soviet Union. Temperatures below -30 degrees froze engines, while long supply lines scorched land, and poor winter clothing left German troops facing deadly shortages. This wreckage belonged to the plane that killed actress Carol Lombard, her mother, and 15 servicemen on Potosi Mountain. Her husband, Clark Gable, desperately wanted her wedding ring recovered, but it remained missing for decades until Michael McComb reportedly found it in 2023. The Cypress Freeway collapsed during the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, crushing cars beneath its upper deck. The disaster killed 63 people, injured more than 3,750, and caused nearly $6 billion in damage. Around 1914, New York Central Locomotive 1063 lies upside down in a creek after a violent derailment. Steam locomotive 2059 powers the wrecking crane above, while workers prepare to recover the engine built in Schenectady in 1889. This aerial view shows Udatong after the North Sea flood struck on February 1, 1953. The village lost 305 people, the highest death toll of any Dutch town in the disaster. In 1978, a United States security officer crawled from a tunnel after investigators found a hidden Soviet listening post inside the American embassy in Moscow. The secret station allowed Soviet agents to spy on diplomats from inside the building itself. In 1900, officials burned plague-infected buildings in Honolulu's Chinatown, but strong winds turned the operation into a massive fire. The flames destroyed 38 acres, left about 4,000 people homeless, and erased much of the district. A Dallas police officer holds the Italian Carcano rifle linked to President John Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Investigators said Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from this weapon, but the rifle remains central to decades of dispute. At -43 degrees, Yellowstone's Old Faithful erupted with water near 190 degrees Fahrenheit, shooting up to 42 meters high. A park ranger captured this rare winter spectacle in 1963 when the freezing air turned the geyser's steam into a towering white cloud. Robert Wadlow, the tallest person ever reliably measured, eats dinner with his family around 1938. He stood 8 feet 11 inches tall and needed a specially raised table because ordinary furniture was far too small. Chief Catalan was a sideshow performer, falsely advertised as the chief of a cannibal tribe from Kenya. This rare photograph shows him in everyday clothes on his way to Hollywood, where he hoped to become a film actor. On November 22, 1963, 5th graders at Montrose Elementary School in Houston learned that President John Kennedy has been killed. Their stunned faces capture the exact moment a national tragedy became real to American children. Lemmy Kilmister strapped into an electric chair during a 1984 photo shoot by Finn Costello. The Motorhead frontman was famous for surviving danger, but this shocking portrait made him look seconds from death. In 1946, Howard University medical students crowded the surgical amphitheater at Freedman's Hospital to watch a gallbladder operation. Alfred Eisenstadt captured the scene, showing dozens of future black doctors training at a hospital founded to treat formerly enslaved people. On May 12, 1957, Marilyn Monroe kicked off a soccer match between the United States and Israel at Ebbets Field. Her powerful first strike hit United Press photographer Joel Landau directly in the head. In 1987, an Afghan Mujahideen fighter proudly displayed a peanut butter ration supplied by the United States during the Soviet-Afghan War. Washington secretly sent weapons and aid to the fighters in one of the largest covert operations of the Cold War. This Roman water boiler was built more than 2,000 years ago and discovered at Villa della Pisanella in Boscoriale, Italy. It is one of the rarest surviving examples because its original pipes and fittings were still intact. In Durham in 1939, tobacco farmers often waited overnight or for days before their crops reached auction. With no lodging provided, many passed the time in cafes and pool halls and slept wherever they could. Known as Princess Marguerite, Marguerite Wyatt was a 38-inch tall French performer who toured America with her husband. Her act had a remarkable twist. She brought her 2 children on stage to compare their height with hers, while telling audiences about her life as a mother. At age 56, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. became the oldest man in the first assault wave on D-Day, landing on Utah Beach under enemy fire. 1 month later, he died from a heart attack and was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Fans scrambled to escape Valley Parade's main stand on May 11, 1985, as a small fire turns deadly within minutes. The flames consumed the wooden structure in just 270 seconds, killing 56 people and injuring more than 265. On May 11, 1985, a discarded cigarette ignited decades of rubbish beneath the wooden stand at Bradford City's Valley Parade Stadium. The stand was destroyed in just 270 seconds, killing 56 people and injuring more than 265. A French soldier takes aim from a narrow trench in the Argonne Forest in 1915. Fighting here was so close that both sides dug tunnels beneath enemy lines and packed them with explosives. On May 11, 1976, a tanker carrying 7,509 gallons of anhydrous ammonia crashed off a Houston freeway ramp, releasing this deadly white cloud. 7 people died and 78 were seriously injured after excessive speed and shifting liquid caused the truck to overturn. On May 11, 1960, Mossad agents captured Adolf Eichmann near his secret home in Argentina. They drugged him, disguised him as an El Al crew member, and smuggled him to Israel to face trial for organizing the Holocaust. Australian soldiers posed beside a captured Ottoman sniper hidden beneath a full suit of leafy camouflage during the Gallipoli campaign. Snipers used local vegetation to blend into the scrub, making them almost invisible until they moved or fired. After being found guilty in a Globe courtroom around 1888, these Apache prisoners were photographed before being sent to Yuma Territorial Prison. Standing second from the right, the Apache Kid still wears the brass tag used to identify him on the reservation. In 1944, Sergeant Olin Dowse used fluent German to persuade hidden German soldiers to surrender during an American attack in France. This photograph captures them crossing the field with their hands raised as an American soldier watches. On May 10, 1941, a 1,000-pound German bomb tore through platforms 3 and 4 at London's St. Pancras station and damaged the Underground Railway below. The station closed for a week, while the same raid killed about 1,400 people across London. The Prague Uprising began on May 5, 1945, as civilians built barricades to block German forces fleeing toward the Americans. Facing a massacre, the rebels accepted help from the Russian Liberation Army, former Nazi allies who suddenly turned their guns on the Germans. On May 10, 1946, the United States successfully launched a captured German 5-2 rocket from White Sands after 2 failed attempts. It climbed 112.6 kilometers, crossing the modern boundary of space years before the space age officially began. On May 11, 1943, American troops landed on fog-covered Attu to retake the only United States soil occupied by Japan. After 19 days of freezing combat, nearly every Japanese defender died, following a final charge that broke through American lines. This photo captures the final seconds before a wedding hall floor collapsed in Jerusalem. The guests fell 2 stories, killing 23 people and injuring about 380 others. In Londonderry in 1972, local women brought tea and biscuits to a masked IRA fighter during the Troubles. The ordinary cups beside his gun captured how armed conflict had become part of daily life in Northern Ireland. Near St. Lo in July 1944, young German prisoners kneel under armed American guard moments after their capture. The guard wears rare camouflage briefly tested by United States troops in Normandy. then largely withdrawn because it resembled German Waffen-SS clothing. This is the cargo ship Pyotr Vasev after it struck the passenger liner Admiral Nakimov near Novorossiysk on August 31, 1986. The liner sank in only 8 minutes, killing 423 people. An 18-foot shark caught at Port Chalmers, New Zealand, drew a huge crowd around 1900. Its massive body was displayed on a horse-drawn cart, turning the rare catch into a public spectacle. Born enslaved in North Carolina in 1851, conjoined twins Millie and Christine McCoy were kidnapped, displayed for profit, and later rescued. After gaining freedom, they toured on their own terms as the Two-Headed Nightingale, sang in several languages, and bought a family estate. In 1951, Rocky Marciano faced his childhood hero, Joe Louis, who was still dangerous at 37. Marciano reluctantly ended the legend's career with a brutal knockout in round 8. On May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II was shot 4 times at close range in St. Peter's Square and nearly bled to death. He survived, then visited the gunman in prison and personally forgave him. In July 1920, Roald Amundsen fed a polar bear cub named Marie aboard his ship. He hoped to train her to pull a sled, but after 1 month she attacked him, and he killed her with chloroform. In 1991, Bruno Barbie photographed United States Marines documenting Kuwait's burning oil fields after Iraqi forces set hundreds of wells on fire. The smoke turned day into darkness, while temperatures near some wells became hot enough to melt metal. The British aircraft carrier Eagle battles through towering waves in 1936. Originally built as a battleship for Chile, she was converted into a carrier and later sunk by a German submarine in 1942. On June 2, 1953, Winston Churchill wore ceremonial robes to attend the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. At 78, he was serving his second term as Prime Minister and had suffered a secret stroke months earlier. Afghan Mujahideen carry rocket-propelled grenades and supplies toward a Soviet Army position in 1988. That year, the Soviet Union began withdrawing its troops after nearly a decade of brutal war. This Soviet convoy carried a gigantic spherical tank filled with liquid hydrogen to the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Several heavy trucks were needed to move the fragile load, which stored rocket fuel at temperatures below -250 degrees Celsius. From 1928 to 1966, the Rocky Springs Wildcat terrified riders with a steep 90-foot first drop. One rider survived it more than 50 times, later rode over 250 roller coasters, and still called the Wildcat his favorite. In 1909, William Howard Taft and Porfirio Diaz held the first meeting between sitting American and Mexican presidents. Nearly 4,000 troops guarded the historic summit, and security agents arrested a man carrying a hidden pistol near the leaders. In 1964, an Australian woman took this photo, claiming it showed a living Tasmanian tiger or Queensland tiger. The mysterious animal was linked to local reports of livestock being brutally mauled by a striped predator. Rosemarie Nitribit, a 24-year-old luxury escort, was found strangled in her Frankfurt apartment on November 1, 1957. Her connections to Germany's elite fueled a national scandal, but her killer was never identified. In 1986, 12-year-old Cian Kingi stopped to help a couple search for their missing poodle. The dog was only a trap, and Cian was abducted and murdered in one of Australia's most horrifying crimes. John McCain spent 5.5 years as a prisoner in North Vietnam, enduring torture and 2 years of solitary confinement. He refused an early release, insisting that prisoners captured before him had to be freed first. A prisoner is escorted through Tobolsk prison in 1980, wearing the striped uniform used to mark convicted inmates. His hands are held behind his back as a guard follows him through the prison's narrow corridor. In 1945, Mexican airmen in the Philippines loaded a 1,000-pound bomb onto a Republic Thunderbolt fighter. Its handwritten message told Japanese Emperor Hirohito, "Bon voyage, with love," and signed the deadly gift, tequila, from the Mexican Expeditionary Air Force. British soldiers rest among the ruins of San Angelo Church and Casino on the 13th of May, 1944. One soldier cleans a captured German MG-42, a machine gun feared for firing up to 20 rounds every second. Workers balanced nearly 60 meters above the ground while building the Hindenburg inside a vast German hangar. At 245 meters long, it remains the largest aircraft ever built by volume, yet its final flight ended in flames in just 34 seconds. At 16, French boxer Fred Bretonel still had the face of a boy. By 23, after 76 professional fights and a European lightweight title, his broken nose and battered features revealed the brutal price of boxing. This 1932 wanted poster offered a $200 reward for Clyde Barrow after he was linked to murder and armed robbery. It warned that the future Bonnie and Clyde outlaw was extremely dangerous and would not hesitate to kill. William Henry Johnson spent nearly 70 years in sideshows, becoming a star of P.T. Barnum's circus while performing in a furry suit as a supposed wild man. Away from the stage, he reportedly became a hero after rescuing a girl from drowning near Coney Island. On February 1, 1968, Eddie Adams captured South Vietnamese General Nguyen Ngoc Loan, shooting a Viet Cong prisoner in a Saigon street. The photograph spread worldwide, won a Pulitzer Prize, and became one of the most powerful images of the Vietnam War. Howard Styles began performing in 1925, touring the United States and Canada, despite ectrodactyly, which split his hands and feet into deep V shapes. He became remarkably skilled at shuffling cards and worked alongside famous three-legged performer Francesco Lentini. In the summer of 1941, German Einsatzgruppen and local collaborators began systematically murdering Lithuania's Jewish population. Roughly 175,000 Lithuanian Jews were killed within 6 months, many shot beside mass graves near their own towns. On December 17, 1937, a young woman calmly watches as a tattoo artist sketches a large dragon across her back. At a time when tattooed women were often circus attractions, such a bold design challenged social expectations. A Bosnian girl carries an AK-47 and smokes while waiting for a funeral at Sarajevo's Lion Cemetery on September 14, 1992. The photograph captures how weapons and death had become part of daily life during the brutal siege of Sarajevo. Wounded soldiers and nurses crowd a Soviet field hospital during the Second World War. With few proper beds, patients lay on stretchers while medical staff worked in cramped, harsh conditions. Soviet troops marched toward the Volkhov Front in January 1942, pulling supplies by horse through deep snow. They were heading into one of the war's harshest battle zones, where extreme cold, hunger, and fierce German resistance killed thousands. On August 26, 1913, workers tore through Pittsburgh's Homewood neighborhood to lower the Pennsylvania Railroad tracks and eliminate a dangerous street crossing. The excavation was so massive that locomotives and freight cars operated below buildings that once stood beside the original track level. On July 6, 1939, Adolf Eichmann arrived in Prague to organize the forced expulsion and systematic robbery of the Jewish population. His office stripped Jews of their money and rights, then ordered them to leave within weeks or face a concentration camp. I will be glad if you can help me gain 1,000 subscribers on this channel.